Welcome to From Center Ice, the podcast. My name is Courtney, and even though it is not Monday, it is Tuesday morning, and this is the From Center Ice Cozy Cast. Of course, brought to you, but not sponsored by Dunkin' Coffee. I have a good old sunrise blend once again here. Let me take a sip of that. And I got a large one today instead of a medium like I usually do because I woke up early to record this episode before my therapy appointment today. So since I woke up earlier, I decided, I should go with a large coffee instead of a medium coffee. And I think that will be a good decision for my day. See, I can't even talk correctly. This is why I need the large coffee. But this is the first podcast episode and first Cozy Cast episode of the 2022 offseason. Because hockey's done. In both the NHL and the AHL. How weird is that? What are we supposed to do in the offseason? It comes around every single year. And every single year, I'm like, well, now what? What am I supposed to do with all of my time since there's no hockey on at night? And somehow, some way, we always get through it. But the first week or so of the off season is always very strange. You have to acclimate to real life again. You have to get used to going outside and talking to people, not just talking to a camera or talking to people over Twitter or whichever internet social media site that you use to talk to people. It's a very strange thing, and so we have to figure out what to do when we don't have actual hockey highlights to talk about. And I guess there's a lot going on in the world these days that we could talk about, but I'm not going to dive into on this episode. There wasn't a happy hour on Friday because times were not very happy here in the good old US of A. And, but now it's Tuesday. I didn't record one yesterday because I did the Stanley Cup Game 6 recap video. I figured I should just let that live on its own on the YouTube channel at least. So, doing the Cozy Cast today, and there was some Blackhawks news yesterday, which I will get to in just a little bit, but there should be a video going up about that today as well. So now that I got that whole intro taken care of, trying this whole not talking about hockey thing, which lasted all of probably 2 minutes. How was your weekend? I hope it was good. Maybe if you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, it wasn't as good as if you are a Colorado Avalanche fan or were rooting for the Colorado Avalanche, such as myself. But yeah, how was your weekend? I didn't really do a whole lot. I did a lot of sitting in my recliner watching crime documentaries on Netflix. That's how I spent most of my weekend, if I'm being honest. And it was kind of nice. So maybe this off season I will work my way through my list on Netflix and Hulu and all of those other streaming services, since there's just a ridiculous number of streaming services out there, which, don't get me wrong, I appreciate them. And I do watch them from time to time, more so in the off season, as during the hockey season there's hockey on every single night. But there's just way too many. It's hard to keep track of. It's kind of funny. We went from a time of just having cable TV and that type of thing to now we have all of these streaming services, and people are like, why can't we just have everything in one spot? And that's what we had with cable, except it wasn't exactly the same, obviously, because you couldn't just watch everything on demand, but we expanded maybe too much. Now it's hard to keep track of. So I try to stick to just the main few, except for some various shows that are on other platforms, but Netflix being the main one. And I wish I could unsubscribe from it because they keep jacking the prices up and all of that, but I enjoy their Netflix originals, at least for documentaries and some of the shows that they make. So it is what it is, I guess. We're stuck with them, much like people are stuck with Amazon, and I also have Amazon Prime. So it is what it is these days, I guess, right? But again, trying this whole not talking about hockey thing, but let's just jump into it and talk about the hockey and talk about everything being wrapped up with a tidy bow, because we have a Stanley Cup champion. And it's crazy to me that the season is over now, even though thinking back on some of the things that happened at the beginning of the season, it feels like the 2021-22 season was about 10 years long. It felt absolutely eternal. But now that it's over, it seems like it went very quick, and it's strange that it's over. But the 2022 Stanley Cup champions are the Colorado Avalanche. There will not be a three-peat for the Tampa Bay Lightning. There is a new champ in town. For the first time in 21 years, the cup goes back to Denver. And I don't think we've talked since game 1 of that series, so I'm going to go over the outcomes of the games. Game 1 was the overtime game with Andrei Burakovsky scoring the overtime game-winning goal, and that was a player who was playing injured. Most of the guys in this series were playing injured, a lot on the Tampa Bay side, but there were quite a few on the Colorado side as well, Burakovsky being one of them. Game 2, the Colorado Avalanche absolutely decimated the Tampa Bay Lightning, winning 7-0. 7-0. That is just an insane Stanley Cup Final game score. 7-0. And it was looking like this thing was going way off the rails for the Lightning. They weren't going to be able to claw their way back into this one. Oh, here comes my cat yelling somewhere. I heard him in the hallway. Do you have something to say about the Stanley Cup Final, buddy? Come on. Come say hi to your friends. Come on. Come on, buddy. Are you just going to sit there and yell at me? Come here. Come say hi to your fans. Or rub on my cords. Come on. There you go. Hi, buddy. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see his glorious appearance that he usually likes to make because he gets upset if I'm talking to anybody that's not him. Right, buddy? If I'm talking, I have to be talking to you, right? Can you please not turn off my audio recording by rubbing on the cords? I would really greatly appreciate that. You make me so nervous every single time. Because these cords are very sturdy, but you keep rubbing on them with your big fluffy face, and I'm afraid that you're going to loosen them, and then they're not going to work as well. Now you're going to rub on my tripod. Cool. Camera's probably going to shake. You're going to give people motion sickness. Come on. Do you have something to say about the Colorado Avalanche beating Tampa Bay 7-0 in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final? No? You just have my cords to rub on and scare yourself by hitting my tripod with your tail? Come on. No? You are so weird. You are such a strange boy. Come here. There you go. You really don't have anything to say. You're just gonna purr very loudly. You're not next to the microphone right now, but people might be able to hear you with how loudly you're purring right now. Sir, we need to talk about this cord nonsense. Why do you like rubbing on the cords? They are not a hard surface. I'm sure they can't scratch your face. Why do you enjoy rubbing on them? To put your mouth scent on them, to claim them as your own, even though they are not yours? Maybe this will turn into the cat podcast in the offseason. Sir, you're going to loosen my cords, buddy. Now you made my nose all itchy with your fur going everywhere. Thanks, that's going to be fun for the rest of this episode with me just scratching my nose. Now it's all red. Anyway, so after that 7-0 win by the Colorado Avalanche, let me try to shake all this cat hair off of me. Oh my gosh, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee now. If you are new to From Center Ice, especially the Cozy Cast or Friday nights happy hour, this is just a pretty much daily thing, or a very regular thing for these podcast episodes, for my cat to decide he wants to make an appearance to talk about something. Sometimes he speaks, sometimes he gets up real close to the microphone and just starts purring into it, so it's like cat ASMR on the podcast as I pick all the cat hair off of it. So yeah, this is how we cozy cast on Monday, with my cat deciding to join in. Alright, so as I was saying, after that 7-0 win, the series shifted back to Tampa Bay, and we saw this in the Eastern Conference Final as well, where Tampa lost the first 2 games in New York at Madison Square Garden to the Rangers, and then they went back home to Tampa and they won 4 straight, even though one of those had to be back in New York. So I'm guessing that they were hoping for the same outcome here, and it got off to a good start for them. In Game 3, the first game back in Tampa, the Lightning beat Colorado 6-2, and you had all of the analysts after that game then saying both teams have had a blowout, because you had Colorado winning 7-0 and then Tampa winning 6-2. And I don't know about you, but I don't really consider 6-2 a blowout. I know it's winning by 4 goals, and 6 goals is a lot to score, especially in a Stanley Cup Final game. It's certainly not unheard of, and not as uncommon as a 7-0 victory, which definitely is more of a blowout in my opinion. But I don't know, what do you think? Is 6-2 a blowout? Especially if you are a Lightning fan who has stumbled upon this podcast. I don't know that there are many of you out there, seeing as I was not rooting for your team throughout the playoffs this year. But if you are still here, do you consider 6-2 a blowout? Maybe you do, and I would hear that argument. I mean, again, winning by 4 goals is a lot, and scoring 6 goals is a lot. But I wouldn't look at that and go, oh, they got blown out, you know? Just one of those things. But then we come back for Game 4, and this was maybe a pivotal game in this series, because it was Nazem Kadri's first game back in the lineup after having surgery on his thumb after Game 3 against the Edmonton Oilers, I believe it was. Let me look down here, actually. Yeah, after Game 3 against Edmonton. And so Kadri returned to the lineup, and he scored the overtime game-winning goal in his first game back, and Colorado won that game 3-2. So we have another close game there, and it seemed like we either had blowout games, if you want to call 6-2 a blowout, or it was a 1-goal game, 2 of them being won in overtime by Colorado. And that was just such a beautiful play by Nazem Kadri. He had to skate through, I believe it was 2 defensemen, and then he slid the puck from his backhand to his forehand and just shot it on Andrei Vasilevsky, and it made its way into the net, even though nobody really knew if it was in or not at first. Thankfully for video replay, we saw that it was indeed in the back of the net, and it was just such a beautiful goal and such a good story for Naz to come back and score that game winner. So then we go back to Denver for Game 5, and at this point, the Colorado Avalanche have a 3-1 series lead, and they have the chance to close it out to win the Stanley Cup on home ice. And Tampa Bay wins that game 3-2. And it wasn't the best game from Colorado. It was certainly a very winnable game. All 3 goals you really want Darcy Kuemper to have. Maybe especially the game-winning goal by Ondrej Palat. I know it was a wide-open shot from the slot. I'm not trying to rhyme here. But like his leg pad got stuck on top of his stick, and it just beat him, and that's when you need your goaltender to make a big save, and maybe you don't expect him to make a save like that. Now I have cat hair in my eye if you're watching the video version of this. Maybe you don't expect a goaltender to make that kind of stop, seeing as he didn't just skate into the zone with the puck and take a clear shot. It was passed to him, I believe, by Victor Hedman, and then he took the shot, and it beat Kuemper, and yeah, maybe in a regular season game, you'll excuse that goal going in, but this is the Stanley Cup Final. This is Game 5, where you have the chance to win the entire thing, and you have the chance to win it at home. And you have these weak goals going in, and maybe if that was the only weak goal of the game, you sort of excuse it, but it wasn't. So that was tough, and they don't close it out at home. So the series shifts back to Tampa for Game 6. And while the Avalanche put themselves in a really good position to win the series, of course, they were up 3-1. That gives them 3 chances to close this thing out. Not winning in Game 5, and then coming into Game 6 in Tampa, and I believe the Lightning had an 8-2 record at home. Of course, coming into the game, Colorado had an 8-1 record on the road, so it's not like they were horrible on the road and Tampa was just dominant at home and there was just no way they were going to win this game. But the 2-time reigning Stanley Cup champs at the time, they were never going to be an easy out, and it was always going to be hard to get that final 4th win in the series, and especially doing it on Tampa Bay ice, that was going to be tough. But if you are the Avalanche going into Game 6, you have to know that, yeah, maybe if you don't win this game, you still have a chance to take it back to Denver and win the cup on home ice. How well did that go in Game 5? Not very well. Again, a winnable game, but this is Tampa, and they are a fantastic team. And Colorado is also obviously a fantastic team, but you don't want this thing going 7 because anything can happen. Your goaltender can have an off night, and maybe if you pull Kuemper and you're able to tie up the game again and Francouz is in the net, who's to say that he doesn't then let in a soft goal? I mean, if you have your goaltender only giving up 1 soft goal a night and you can score goals at the rate that the Colorado Avalanche do, you're going to be in a pretty good position. But if you have 2 goaltenders doing it in the same game, that's when it gets a bit more rough. And Tampa Bay can certainly score goals. They have Steven Stamkos, who was leading his team on the ice. He wasn't their leading point scorer, but he was up there and definitely leading by example on the ice. You have Nikita Kucherov, you have Ondrej Palat, who scored the game winner in Game 5, who always seems to come up with clutch goals. You have Victor Hedman, you have all of these guys who are known to put up points and score goals and be able to do it in the most frustrating of manners. And they just find ways to win games. And they weren't the reigning 2-time champs for nothing. And then you have the best goaltender in the world, Andrei Vasilevsky, on the other side of the ice. And if your goaltenders are holding down the fort and not letting all of these guys that I just named score a bunch of goals, you still have to beat Andrei Vasilevsky. And while Colorado did a pretty good job of that in the Stanley Cup Final, remember, winning 7-0, he's very good in closeout games, especially when facing elimination. For the past few years, he had a record of 4-0 and a ridiculous save percentage, something like a .945 save percentage. So it was never going to be easy to win that fourth game. And that's not taking anything away from the Colorado Avalanche, who were obviously very capable of doing so. But this is a tough team. They won 2 cups in a row. They know how to win. They know how to grind out games. They're frustrating to play against. They can turn up that physical game. They can score obnoxious goals. Andrei Vasilevsky can turn it on and just be obnoxious and unbeatable in net. And then you have John Cooper whining to the officials all the time. But we're not going to talk about the coach right now because he drives me crazy. So I'll just be complimentary of the very good players that they have on the ice. So Game 6, while maybe not as much pressure as in Game 5 for Colorado, seeing as it wasn't on home ice, you don't have all of those home fans in the crowd that you're afraid of letting down. It was a big game. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee here. Again, I like to say that for the people who aren't watching on YouTube and just listening to the audio, so there's not just random dead air. Of course, if you're watching, you can see me take a sip of my coffee. But Game 6 was huge, and we had to know coming into it that it was going to be a great game. Like I said, Tampa had a record of 8-2 at home. Colorado with the 8-1 record going into the game. On the road, coming off of the loss at home, they hadn't lost 2 consecutive games this whole playoff run. It was going to be good, and Tampa, with their backs up against the wall, always seemed to find a way. And Steven Stamkos scored very early into this game. I want to say a minute and change in, perhaps. Maybe it was 3 minutes. Either way, it doesn't really matter. It was very early into this game. And it was... I want to say it was a weak goal by Darcy Kuemper, but I don't think that fully describes what happened there. Kucherov had the puck behind the net. He was battling with McKinnon. He loses the puck. It goes kind of between McKinnon and Makar ends up turning it over. It ends up on Steven Stamkos' stick right in front of Darcy Kuemper. And Kuemper, I don't even know. I tried to explain this when I did the recap video yesterday, but I don't know. He just ended up on all fours in the crease, turned sideways, and that wasn't any sort of goaltending I have ever seen. So Stamkos was on the board early. It was 1-0 going into the first intermission, but then Nathan McKinnon scored to tie up the game, and then Arturi Lehkonen, after scoring the overtime game-winning goal against the Edmonton Oilers to send the team to the Stanley Cup Final, scores in the second period to give them the 2-1 lead, and that is your Stanley Cup winning goal from Arturi Lehkonen, because the Colorado Avalanche put on a defensive clinic in the third period, and Tampa Bay only had 4 shots on goal as they were looking to tie this thing up. And wow, that was maybe the best period of defensive hockey we have seen in a long time, maybe ever. So those are your Stanley Cup champs, the 2022 Colorado Avalanche. So, of course, Gabriel Landeskog got the Stanley Cup first, as they always give it to the captain. Interestingly enough, Gary Bettman was not there to present the Stanley Cup, and everybody was like, where's Gary? Why can't we boo Gary? Apparently, he tested positive for COVID, so Bettman was not there to hand off the cup to Gabriel Landeskog. So it went from Gabe to Eric Johnson, who is the longest tenured Avalanche player. He's been there for the better part of 12 seasons. He was acquired in February 2011, and he was just beyond emotional, and it made me emotional watching him being so happy to finally win the cup after all of the stuff they have been through there with Colorado, having that 48-point season and getting Cale Makar out of that after they lost the draft lottery. They lost the draft lottery and got Cale Makar. Like, what? I still think it's the most hilarious thing ever that they had 48 points, a historically bad season, and lost the draft lottery, picking 4th overall. But it more than worked out for them because they got Cale Makar with that pick, who won the Norris Trophy earlier in the week prior, and then he won the Conn Smythe Trophy as the playoff MVP. Just incredible stuff from a 23-year-old defenseman. But the cup went from Gabe to Eric Johnson. Eric Johnson handed it off to Andrew Cogliano, who apparently was very vocal in the players-only meeting that they had after Game 5. I saw this in an article on NHL.com, and he stepped up and kind of had a speech telling the guys to stay in the moment because they were maybe looking too far ahead, thinking about winning the trophy and not focusing on winning the game. And this is a guy who has played over 1,000 games in the National Hockey League, and this is his first championship. So when a guy like that steps up in the locker room and talks, you know that this means so much to him. He's had so many years of grinding it away in the NHL, and he had an Ironman streak going at one point, and he was huge for the team this year, also having hand surgery just like Nazem Kadri did, and then coming back and playing and finally being able to lift that cup, having those guys speak up in the locker room and showing their teammates how much it means to them. It really is able to focus the guys, and we saw this in Chicago with Kimmo Timonen in 2015. He didn't play a whole lot. He had come back from having blood clots in his legs. Chicago acquired him from Philadelphia, and then he finally got his championship, and that is a great moment, seeing him raise the cup. But you need those guys in the locker room sometimes, because the Avs are a young team. I mean, Gabe is, I want to say 29 now, but he was the youngest captain in the NHL, being named captain at 19. So he's kind of grown up with the team, but they haven't made it to this point before. And they're still fairly young, but a guy like Cogliano having over 1,000 games and being a huge part of this team's run, being a defensively responsible player out there and really laying it all out on the ice, it means a lot. So he got it after Eric Johnson did, and then Cogliano handed it off to Nathan MacKinnon, who tied up the game. He finally showed up in a big moment in this series. And we've seen him show up in big moments throughout this playoff run, but those first few games were really frustrating. It's like, Nate, you need to get on the board, buddy. You need to score some goals here. We need you to show up. And then he tied up the game, letting Arturi Lehkonen be in that position to get that game-winning goal. And he assisted on that goal, actually. But Nathan MacKinnon finally gets his cup after last year saying, I think it was his 9th year in the league and he hasn't won shit. Well, now he's won shit. Nate handed it off to Jack Johnson, who is now a Stanley Cup champ after being in the league for so many years as well, going through a lot personally with his family. Jack Johnson handed it off to Nazem Kadri. Nazem Kadri is a Stanley Cup champion. Oh, that also made me very emotional. Probably more than Jack Johnson even, but seeing Naz finally raise the cup after all of those times in Toronto, getting eliminated in the first round by Boston, and then having the suspensions, and then coming to the Avs, getting suspended against St. Louis, and then coming into this year and having racist threats and threats of physical harm and violence against him and his family after Bennington gets injured, and then having to have thumb surgery after getting boarded by Evander Kane, coming back, scoring that overtime game-winning goal in Game 4, and then finally raising the cup as a Stanley Cup champion. Just incredible. As soon as that final buzzer went, I went on NHL Shop and bought my Nazem Kadri Stanley Cup jersey. I was waiting until they won it. I was going to buy one after Game 5 because I didn't want them to sell out. And I was like, no, don't jinx it. You have to just wait until they finally win it. And so they did. And as soon as that buzzer went, I was like, okay, they can't sell out on me. I gotta buy it now. So I'm waiting for that to come in, and then it can join my Kadri Toronto jersey. But man, that was a fantastic moment. He's the first Muslim player to win the Stanley Cup. And he had a great interview. I believe it was with Sportsnet after the game, maybe TSN. I don't know. It was with a Canadian outlet. But he said whoever thought he was a playoff liability can kiss his ass. It's very Naz and very perfect. And he's right. He was huge in these playoffs for the Avalanche. Getting that hat trick against St. Louis, just incredible to see him get to raise the Stanley Cup. It went from him to Andre Burakovsky to Darcy Kemper, who held it down, to Mikko Rantanen, who was leading the team in assists throughout the first few rounds, even though everybody said he started off slow, which he did. Once they faced Edmonton, he was finally able to score on a goaltender. Thank you, Mike Smith. Went from him to Darren Helm, who after winning with Detroit all of those years ago, finally got a second championship. To Devon Toews, who's been there for a couple years. That was an absolute steal of a trade by Joe Sakic. 2 second-round picks for Devon Toews. Are you kidding me? To Valerie Nichushkin, who, gosh, I mean, Cale Makar was definitely deserving of the Conn Smythe, and apparently it was a unanimous decision to give it to Makar, but Nichushkin was absolutely instrumental in this Avalanche team winning the Stanley Cup. He was beyond huge for them. And then it goes to Pavel Francouz, who came in Game 1 against Edmonton when Darcy Kemper went down with an injury and got them to the Stanley Cup Final. They swept Edmonton with Pavel Francouz in net. I mean, what more can you ask from your backup goaltender than that? And it went from Francouz to Makar, the Conn Smythe winner, the Norris Trophy winner at 23, to JT Compher, who scored some huge goals for them against St. Louis to tie up these games when St. Louis had a lead, to Josh Manson, who, you know, scored some huge goals himself, got an overtime game winner against Nashville, I believe, had a goal against St. Louis, I think it was, maybe it was Edmonton, but shot blocking machine in Game 5, even though they lost that one to Tampa. he was a huge acquisition at the trade deadline to Arturi Lehkonen, maybe the best trade deadline acquisition for the past few years. I mean, you can't say enough about this guy and how he contributed. Him, along with Gabriel Landeskog, in on the forecheck for Colorado. Absolutely dynamic. To Nico Sturm, to Samuel Girard with his broken sternum, and Logan O'Connor, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, who dented the Stanley Cup before the team picture, to Ryan Murray, Curtis McDermott. Neither of those guys saw time in the playoffs. To Bowen Byram, who looked not at all out of place on the ice, and he didn't know if he was going to be able to continue playing hockey because of concussion issues. And he could have been forced to retire young because of that. And Eric Johnson didn't know if he was going to have to retire last summer because of injuries. To Alex Newhook, the young guy, and then just on and on. Jared Bednar, the first coach to win the Kelly Cup with the ECHL with South Carolina in 2008-9. That is their championship. The Calder Cup, the American Hockey League championship with Lake Erie in 2015-16. They swept the Ice Hogs that year. And then finally, the Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche in 2022. And then to Joe Sakic, who captained the Colorado Avalanche to 2 Stanley Cups in 1996 and 2001, and now he wins it with the Avs again as the GM of the team. This was a special Avalanche team, and it was a lot of fun to watch them throughout this run. And just congrats to the Avs, congrats to their fans. It's huge. This team is incredible. And now comes the shitty part of the whole team not staying together. They have a lot of cap room, but they have a lot of free agents, which we'll get to in a moment. But I'll go over the point leaders for both teams because, again, Tampa Bay, absolutely incredible, stacked roster with some great players. I'm going to take a sip of my coffee here real quick. Up first, Nikita Kucherov, 8 goals, 19 assists in the playoffs for 27 points, leading the way. Up next, Andre Palat, 11 goals, 10 assists for 21 points in the playoffs. Steven Stamkos, their captain, 11 goals, 8 assists for 19 points. Victor Hedman, 3 goals, 16 assists for 19 points. Corey Perry, 6 goals, 5 assists for 11 points. This is his 3rd consecutive trip to the Stanley Cup Final and 3rd consecutive loss. The first 2 were against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The first one with Dallas, of course, and then with Montreal last year. And then he goes to Tampa and loses in the Cup Final with Tampa Bay. I mean, come on. It's funny. Mikhail Sergachev, 2 goals, 8 assists for 10 points. Ross Colton, 5 goals, 4 assists for 9 points. He scored the Cup-winning goal last year, not so much this year. Nick Paul, 5 goals, 4 assists for 9 points. Massive trade deadline acquisition for Tampa. Anthony Cirelli, 3 goals, 5 assists for 8 points. And rounding it out, the top 10, Patrick Maroon, 4 goals, 2 assists for 6 points. He does not get that 4th consecutive Stanley Cup. He won the 2 with Tampa, obviously, and then he was with the St. Louis Blues in 2019 when they won. He was going for that 4th in a row, but Colorado got in the way. And then the man in net, Andrei Vasilevsky, a record of 14-9 in the playoffs, a .922 save percentage, and a .252 goals against average. He was not the problem here. And then I have the point leaders for Colorado, and of course, leading the way, the young defenseman, Cale Makar, 8 goals, 21 assists for 29 points. Mikko Rantanen, 5 goals, 20 assists for 25 points. Nathan MacKinnon, 13 goals, 11 assists for 24 points. Gabriel Landeskog, the captain, 11 goals, 11 assists, 22 points. Valeri Nichushkin, 9 goals, 6 assists for 15 points. And Nazem Kadri, 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points. Devon Taves, 5 goals, 10 assists for 15 points. Arturi Lehkonen, the big-time goal scorer, 8 goals, 6 assists for 14 points. In ninth, Bowen Byram, 0 goals, but 9 assists, and he assisted on the tying goal for Nathan MacKinnon, so 9 points for him in the playoffs. And rounding out the top 10, we have JT Compher with 5 goals and 3 assists for 8 points. And then in net, I have both goaltenders since they both played a huge role in this. We have Darcy Kemper with a 10-4 record in the playoffs, a .902 save percentage, and a 2.57 goals against average. And then Pavel Francouz, the incredible backup goaltender, a 6-0 record in the playoffs, a .906 save percentage, and a 2.81 goals against average. That is your Stanley Cup winning team and their top 10 point getters and their 2 goaltenders. And like I mentioned, now is the shitty part where some of these guys are free agents. I'll start with Tampa. They don't have any restricted free agents on their roster this year. There are a couple guys in Syracuse, but they only have UFAs on their NHL roster currently. Up first is Riley Nash, the 33-year-old. I'm sure he goes elsewhere. You have Nick Paul. He's only 27, but he was making $1.35 million this past season. He's definitely due for a raise, especially with his performance in the postseason. And Tampa doesn't have any cap space, barring some trades. So maybe Nick Paul was purely a rental and they are just going to have to say farewell to him, which would suck because he was really big for them. But what are you going to do? Jan Ruda, 31-year-old defenseman. He's been steady as he goes for Tampa back there since being traded from Chicago. I don't know if he's going to demand a huge raise, but again, Tampa doesn't have cap room. I'm sure they will make some trades to free up some cap. I don't know who they will move, but we'll see what they do. And then the big one is Andre Palat. He's 31, obviously a huge contributor for this team in all of their cup runs. But he was making $5.3 million this year, and you have to assume that he's going to want at least that, and probably, I don't know, maybe we'll get a raise, $6 million, 6.5. It's hard to say. It's hard to say with these contracts. You never know what GMs are going to hand out, especially with the cap only going up $1 million. But if Tampa loses Palat, that's a huge hole for them, especially if they lose Palat and Nick Paul. I know he was only there for a short time, coming over at the deadline from Ottawa, and I think he only scored 5 goals in the regular season and then had 5 goals and 4 assists in the postseason, but his impact on the ice was felt a lot more than just those 9 points, in my opinion. Maybe if you're a Tampa fan, you will disagree with that, but he was always scary when he was out there and you just felt like he was going to make something happen. But then transitioning to the Avalanche, they have a lot more free agents, but they also have like $25 million in cap space. Of course, Nathan MacKinnon needs a contract extension after next year, and so does Bowen Byram. If I were Joe Sakic, I would try to get Nate locked up this year. This summer, at least, because you never know what next year is going to look like, and maybe he absolutely explodes, and maybe they go on another special run in the playoffs. So I think it would be smart to lock him up so you kind of have an idea what your cap is going to look like going forward, and you could see how many of these guys you can sign. I would maybe hold off on Byram until next summer. He will be an RFA, so you can always give him a qualifying offer, and I'm sure they will extend him before that, or at least get it done quickly in the offseason next year. But with the concussion issues that he's had, if you're Joe Sakic, I would hold off. But if you are Bo Byram, I would also hold off because of how well he played in the postseason. If he can come back and have a full regular season and postseason next year, then he will be in line for a bigger raise, I would assume, than if he were to sign in this postseason. So those are two to keep in mind there. But they have a couple of RFAs. Nicolas Aube-Kubel, he was making just over $1 million this year. He's 26. I could see them parting ways with him. He didn't play really a huge role in the postseason there. They picked him up off of waivers this year from Philly. And he dented the cup. I mean, come on. Not that we can hold that against him because it gets absolutely demolished by every team that wins the cup. But the big one here is Artturi Lehkonen. And he was making $2.3 million this season. You have to assume he's in line for a raise with how he performed this postseason. He also came over at the trade deadline, so he didn't have a full year with Colorado, but I would assume they would try to keep him if possible. I would be really surprised if there were just no conversations and they just let him walk for nothing. But those are the two RFAs, and then we get to UFAs, and the list gets a bit longer here. Andrei Burakovsky, he's 27, now a two-time Stanley Cup champ since he won with Washington, but he was making $4.9 million last year. He was dealing with injuries. Of course, he wasn't bad in the playoffs. He was pretty good when he was able to be in there and play, but the injuries kept him out for some games. I don't know what they're going to do there. Andrew Cogliano, he's 35. He was only making $1 million, but will he retire, go out on top now that he has his championship? We'll have to wait and see. If he doesn't, I don't know that Colorado brings him back. It's those depth guys that are kind of easier to let go when you're thinking about your cap, especially if they have guys coming up through the Eagles that can replace that role. Darren Helm is another one. He's also 35, was making $1 million. He's another guy that they could let go of now that he has his second cup. Will he retire? Possibly. Nazem Kadri is a big one. He's only 31. He was making $4.5 million. He's definitely in line for a raise. They have the money, and this is why I think they should extend Nathan MacKinnon this offseason, because if they can, and they have room to sign Kadri, I don't see why they couldn't. If Eric Johnson decides to retire now that he has his cup, especially not knowing if he would have to retire last offseason, there's another $6 million that would go toward Nate, and he's already making 6 point something, so that's $12 million, and I don't know that he's going to be making more than that. So there's your cap for him. It'll be interesting to see. Most people assume Kadri's going to be signing somewhere else, but we'll see. You never know. And I think if they can keep him, they should try to keep him because he's been huge. And I mean, he had a breakout year this year, which is crazy to say because Kadri's always been a great player, but he had a career season and a career postseason run. So maybe they think he's not going to be I don't want to say not worth the money that he deserves this offseason, but maybe they don't know if he will be able to recreate that same kind of success going forward. I don't know. We will have to see what they do there. Valery Nichushkin is another one. He was making $2.5 million. He's only 27, which is crazy. It feels like he's been around for absolutely ever. So we'll see if they can sign him. I know everybody said that he was due for a big raise as well, and I could certainly see that, but Joe Sakic has a way of working magic, so we'll see. Nico Sturm, I could see them parting ways with him. He didn't really do a whole lot in the postseason. Jack Johnson, I could see him retiring now that he has his championship. Josh Manson is an interesting one. They brought him in at the deadline. He was pretty good back there defensively for the Avalanche, scored some big goals in the playoffs. But he is 30 years old and was making $4.1 million. Do they decide to give him a one-year deal, see what he can do for a full season with Colorado? Or do they just say thank you and good luck and send him on his way? The back end there is something that they could potentially upgrade, which is funny to say because they have Cale Makar and Bowen Byram. But if you're going to lose Eric Johnson, which I'm not saying is going to happen, he still has 1 year left on his contract, but now he has his cup, and again, he didn't know if he would have to retire last offseason, so maybe that helps his decision a little bit. And if you lose Jack Johnson, I don't know. Do they bring Josh Manson back? What do you think? Ryan Murray is also a UFA. He didn't see any time in the postseason and was making $2 million. So I could see them just saying goodbye and good luck. And then Darcy Kemper in net. He's 32, was making $4.5 million. It's hard to say that as a cup-winning goaltender now that you should move on from him, but he kind of reminds me of an Antti Niemi situation in Chicago when they won in 2010. He didn't put up the best performance, but the team was good enough to cover up those mistakes and still get the win, and he did come up with some big games and was able to shut it down at times, but it's hard to say that they should just roll it back in net. They do have Pavel Francouz on contract for 2 more years. I don't know that he would be a starting goaltender. That's another spot where they could potentially try to upgrade, but I don't know who they would put in net there. There's not many goaltenders that are available. I don't think that they're going to run with Francouz and Annunen. I don't know what they're going to do in net. That would be probably better off left to the opinion of somebody who follows the Avs more in depth. But it's going to be very interesting to see what they do there and see if they try to upgrade or if they just re-sign Kemper and bring him back to see if they can do it again. I don't know. But that was your Stanley Cup Final. That took up most of this episode. There's a lot of other stuff that has happened. Jumping to the Leafs really quickly. They re-signed Timothy Liljegren for 2 years at an average cap hit of $1.4 million. So that is a great contract for Liljegren. And last season, in the regular season, he had 5 goals and 18 assists in 61 games. In the playoffs, he only played 2 games and didn't score any points, but I thought it was absolutely ridiculous that he only got 2 games. That was a bad coaching decision by Sheldon Keefe if Liljegren wasn't injured. Just a very strange decision there. And then jumping over to the Blackhawks, they have their coach. They officially announced the hiring of Luke Richardson as the 40th head coach in Blackhawks history. A little bit of his history here. He played 21 seasons in the NHL as a defenseman. He started with the Toronto Maple Leafs, being drafted 7th overall by them in 1987. Then he played with the Oilers, the Flyers, the Blue Jackets, where he was the captain for a year or two, and then Tampa Bay and Ottawa. He's 10th all-time in games played amongst NHL defensemen with 1,417 games. He scored 35 goals and 166 assists in his career. He got into coaching after his career started as an assistant coach with the Senators in 2009 through 2012. He was the head coach of the Binghamton Senators from 2012 to 2016. Then he was the head coach for Team Canada in the Spangler Cup in 2016. He was an assistant coach with the New York Islanders for the 2017-18 season, and he's been an assistant coach with the Montreal Canadiens since then. So that is the Blackhawks' new head coach. Like I said, I'll have a separate video about the whole hiring, but I'm glad that Kyle Davidson and crew saw the need to move on from Derek King as coach, especially going into a rebuild. You don't need a guy who consistently throws his players under the bus after losses, and they really need a guy in there who will instill a good work ethic in these kids and will create a good culture in the locker room. And maybe Luke Richardson is that guy. I have to look into him some more, but from the brief things that I've read so far, players really enjoy playing for him. And I'm intrigued. I don't know that I can say I'm excited yet, especially since we don't know what's going to happen with Derek King yet. I just need the news that he's not going to go back to the Ice Hogs before I get fully excited. I think they should give Anders Sorensen a year as like a tryout contract, because as interim coach this past season, he did a lot of really good things with the Ice Hogs, and maybe he is their solution going forward as permanent head coach. So I think it would be a good idea to give him a year at least to see if they can recreate that success and grow as a team. But Luke Richardson is your coach for the Chicago Blackhawks. And how do you feel about that? If you're a Blackhawks fan, what are you thinking? Are you happy with Luke Richardson? Did you think Derek King was the answer? I don't know anybody who did, but you never know. You never know. There was some other news in the NHL, but I will save that for the happy hour on Friday because it's not super timely. But before I wrap up here, I mentioned that hockey is over in the American Hockey League as well. The Chicago Wolves are the Calder Cup champions because, of course, they are. They won the series 4-1 against the Springfield Thunderbirds. They actually lost Game 1 in overtime 5-4, but then they came back in Game 2, winning 6-2. In Game 3, Pyotr Kochetkov got a shutout, winning 4-0. Game 4, the Chicago Wolves won 4-2. And then in Game 5, Alex Lyon got the shutout 4-0 to win the Calder Cup. And that was an interesting team where both goaltenders played really big roles for them. The last Calder Cup that was awarded was in 2019. There was not one awarded in 2020 because the season was canceled due to COVID. And then for the 2021 season, it was a shortened season and there was no playoffs, so there was not a cup awarded then. So the last one was in 2019. That was the Charlotte Checkers, who were the affiliate of the Carolina Hurricanes. And of course, now the Chicago Wolves are affiliated with the Carolina Hurricanes. So the past two Calder Cup winners have been the affiliate of the Carolina Hurricanes, which is just wild. So I guess they did a good thing there with changing their affiliate to Chicago. That's not to say that they wouldn't have won as Charlotte had they stayed with them, but you never know. So congratulations to the Calder Cup winning Chicago Wolves, proving that the Central Division is the best division in the American Hockey League. So even though it was not my Ice Hogs, I am happy that they proved the Central is the best, not only in the West, but in the entire American League. And speaking of the Ice Hogs, they officially updated their logo. It's not a whole lot different. It's still the hammy head, but there is no longer a stick in his mouth, and now it is a round logo with, it says Rockford on the top in the circle, and it says Ice Hogs in the bottom, and it has the hammy head in the middle. I posted it on Twitter yesterday if you want to go take a look at that. So, yeah, that pretty much does it for all of the news that I have time for here. I hope that you have a fantastic week. Let me know what you're going to be up to in the off season now that there's no more hockey to watch. At least no more NHL or AHL hockey or ECHL hockey. Yeah, let me know what you're going to be up to. I hope you have a great week. I will get to some other news on Friday for the happy hour. But this has been the From Center Ice Cozy Cast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to find us on different places, you can head over to FromCenterIce.com. There's links to everything over there. If you're listening on YouTube, or listening and or watching on YouTube, and you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, go ahead and do that. Give this podcast video a like. That would make me happy. If you are listening to the audio only version, wherever you get your podcasts, and you would like to watch on YouTube, you can. That is youtube.com/c/FromCenterIce, but the link will also be in the show notes for you to make it easy. If you are watching on YouTube and you prefer audio only podcasts, you can stream this wherever you get your podcasts. So I like to try to make it easy for you. If you are listening on a podcast app, especially on Apple Podcasts, give me a rating and a review. I would appreciate that very, very much. But that's going to be all from me in this episode. Again, I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you all so very much for tuning in. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And again, I hope you have a wonderful week. I will see you either over on YouTube in videos throughout the week, or I will catch you Friday for the happy hour. And yeah, I will see y'all then. Bye, guys.